All right, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian Promert's Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Wednesday. The plan of these, in case you're just watching for the first time, what I normally do is kind of just give a quick overview of the day's events, some of the sector moves, the overall market, what it did for the day. I review option activity, and then just a little bit about what I did and what I traded for the day. First things first, huge rotation today. My goodness, really one of the fastest rotations I've either ever seen, or or just up there in terms of top three. I mean, I've traded through a lot of things institutionally on an ETF desk, which is really, as they say, fast money. Especially 2007 to 2008. I also traded through the flash crash, where kind of everything. The difference, I think, of what we saw today and what we've seen now a couple times, and it does remind me. I would say the closest to is probably back towards the election time when we saw a lot of areas that really haven't participated. Like the banks, like the defense names. A lot of those so-called. I hate to use this term, but Trump trade. Um, but this was this was accelerated. We saw that yesterday, where the financials really outpaced everybody. But the financials, the tech underperformed yesterday, and I kind of thought we would have a little bit more of that today. Maybe tech underperforming, maybe a continuation from yesterday. But what happened instead was just really a violent, and as they say, it turns violent. And that was the term that I used earlier too on Twitter, was just I would call it a violent rotation. I mean, really, things moving quick, and it's just very odd to see some things like the semiconductors down well over 4%, and then you have a bunch of other groups such as the transports. I mean, the IYT, the transport ETF, was up 3.4%. So it just, you kind of pair these things up, and I think at one point the banks were up, the KRE was up 4%, and the semis were also down 4%. So it's almost, you could see, you could make the connection, one into one, or out of one and into the other. But this was just pretty crazy. I don't think I've ever seen it so much like that. But I think there was some reasons for it, right? We can kind of analyze that a little bit. There was a deal that was announced after the close. Juniper. I don't own any Juniper. I wish I did, but you know, I don't. I think a couple members actually owned it, so congratulations for owning Juniper. Someone actually mentioned in the room that it was really outperforming very well today. I don't want to call their name out, but because I didn't ask them, but they did mention it, and they were like, "Hey, you weren't listening to me." So great call. But this is what happens a little bit, if we go back to this SMH ETF, and this is why there's a couple things here. Number one, it's very tricky to figure out when this is going to happen. This is one of the biggest down days I think I've ever seen. Look at the volume in the semiconductor ETF. I think that's could be the biggest volume ever. I'll have to go back and check on Bloomberg, but we had talked about this, this group getting really overbought, and it was kind of, you had this one day which, kind of burned off those overbought levels, and it was like, okay, maybe that's all we're going to get. Now, one thing that we've seen is just repetitive SMH put buying, and they've been buying them all through here. Big SMH puts. We did see a big order last week. I think it was about a $450,000 put order. So there was some warnings here that this group was getting a little bit, out of hand in terms of sentiment, and in terms of just being overbought. So it was, you kind of felt like it was coming, you just didn't know when. There was a little bit of a shakeout in here, but it's happened now several times in this SMH ETF where we've just had these big sell-off days. I think this is the biggest day. This rivals it, I think, but we did finish off the lows. Notice we did come back into support. We actually held the November valuary, which will be over in 2 days, November. But we did hold support, believe it or not. It kind of looks like this. Now, granted, we did go a little bit lower here for a couple weeks, but we did make it out and moved higher here. Hence this trend line drawn, which ended up being a real nice indicator. As soon as we broke above that, we never really looked back. So you may have to kind of sit and wait and let this kind of wash through. We normally don't get V recoveries. Normally it takes a little while. So just, I think be patient, and spread your trades out, a little bit farther than, I know it's tempting to take weeklies to try to anticipate a move, but generally what I like to do is go out a little bit further. So, I wanted to talk about the bad first, and I think that's definitely, I mean, another, a couple other groups to look at were the software. This has been another really real nice area to be in this year, and down 3.6%. The Chinese Internet ETF, which I actually started a position in this today on the dip. There were certain things that I did today that I added, but one of the things I'll kind of share with you, one of my secrets, when two things that I mentioned today to members in the trading room was, two things to watch were, because let's just bring up the Qs chart just for a second. I remember seeing this back in August a couple times where we saw a lot of put buying take place in the Qs. And we also saw this VXN. VXN, a lot of people aren't familiar with this, but the VXN is the VIX for the Qs. So just like everybody kind of looks at and, oh, why is the VIX so low? Really good to look at other things than just remember what the VIX is. It just measures the implied volatility of the SPX. It doesn't look at anything else. That's the only thing it does. So this was up today. We did get back to 1070. Remember, we were up to 14 last week. And we had talked about how this wasn't too much of a warm and fuzzy feeling for us to get below 10 again. Well, we didn't really stay below 10 for very long in the VIX. I also mentioned a couple other things that you could have tracked, such as a lot of outflows coming out of SVXY, which is the you could see this if I don't have it up anymore. Let's see. Nope, I don't have it up anymore. But there was a lot of outflows going into the inverse. Money being taken out of the inverse ETF, VIX ETF, and money going into UVXY and VXX. That happened towards the end of last week. But what I wanted to get to is VXN. If you're not watching this is really good. If you are trading a lot of Nasdaq names or tech names, this is a really good indicator. This is what happened today. It finished up 22%. So I don't really like, some people will try to buy when the market's selling off. I will wait until this stops making a peak and will start to come in. Now, we did sell off pretty hard from the highs. This was a 1660, which dropped down pretty nicely. We got that nice little bounce off the lows today, but we never really broke the trend. This purple line is like a 50-day, is a 50-period moving average. Notice how we fell right into it, and we almost broke it a couple times, but we just were not ready to. So when this happens, when volatility really starts to drop, you will start to see all of the tech stocks, the tech stocks, momentum stocks really start to rally, but we just didn't see that. Apple was one name that I was looking at that we saw a little bit of call buying in. There was that move. You could kind of rival that with the top and the VXN. But so that's the bad, and I spent enough time on that. But it's, you don't hear a lot of people on Twitter. All the so-called gurus are talking about, all these, all the trades, all the things that are moving up. But, it's impossible, to be a one-person trader as I am. It's different if you have a whole bench of people. But these moves were really quick. I had a lot of exposure to financials that I got long in the last couple of weeks, which worked out really well. Some exposure to some retail names as well. Not retail, industrial names as well, which did wonderfully. But I still have names, especially some names that I just added. I just put on Visa yesterday. I mean, this was a colossal sell-off today in Visa. This is one of the first things that I've noticed. And there's not much you could really do. I mean, you could maybe get off on the first, try to get out of your position very quickly, but so I know there's a lot of people doing victory laps and talking about charts of this name and that name and that name. You just have to put things in perspective. I find it very hard to believe that everybody got out of all their tech stocks yesterday. So for me, it was not such a fun day. A lot of management and a lot of watching some of the positions going down. Again, I had a lot of positions that went up today, a lot of targets on things that I just added. I added Berkshire Hathaway yesterday. I added BlackRock last week. and a number of other names. Fastenal was a huge name. But you have to manage some of these other names that are moving down. Western Digital was another name I got caught in. This was a name that worked really well for me for a little while, and I was looking for this target, and unfortunately, the Morgan Stanley downgrade took it down to here. We saw call buying, and I actually added to. I changed around a position and added to it. So these things happen. So I want to talk about. I think people on Twitter just talk about their winners. This is not easy when things happen this quick. When something like this sells off in 7% in a matter of a couple hours, it's really not easy to deal with. So you have to think about whether or not you want to bail on positions. What I actually ended up happening to me, again, which I'll share with you, and I don't mind, I was taking off a lot of winners today, and I was letting the losers, holding on to the losers, thinking that they're going to rebound. Unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen that way. You have some nice names. Again, I'll show you the Berkshire chart. But it's really tough. When you have more than if you have just two or three positions on, it's fine. But if you have a portfolio of names on, like I do, it's tough. But Berkshire was a real nice name for me. Fastenal was a real nice name for me as well. I think I actually sold that one pretty close to the highs. FTX was another one. Going back to the transports again. I spent 10 minutes on the negative, but I just wanted to share that it's not that easy as what everybody on Twitter says. It's really not because these names, some of these momentum names, tech names, have been great all year long. And if they're talking about being not in them, then they obviously have missed the whole run in them for the year. So just keep that in mind. But FedEx, really huge name. This was a position I got in and out of today. That was one of the first signals that we saw today. I went right into that. That was just a weekly call buyer. That's it. No big chunky trade. I just it was something that I had not seen for a long time, and just decided to go into it. The rails were just a huge again, whole transports were up 3.4%. You kind of break it down. One of my colleagues, Pat, actually mentioned UNP earlier in the day. This saw repeat activity in it, up 4.1%. Same thing with CSX. CSX was up 4.4%. So you could take your pick which rail you wanted. And most of them saw call buying. NSC was also up 4.8%. And KSU was, I guess, the underperformer of the group, but pretty nice looking chart, up 3.4%. So that's where we saw call buying. Other groups, again, for the second, I guess it's the second day in a row that the banks have outperformed. KRE, the regional bank ETF, just monster move the last 2 days. And gapping up and out. I mentioned yesterday that basically all you have to do is you don't necessarily have to pick and choose one of the banks when they're all moving. You could basically just own the ETF, and then you don't have to worry about single stock risk. But KRE is a name that both KRE and XLF, we've seen just a lot of call buying in those names. And then what was, I would say another surprise is look at the retail. Again, talking about timing, we saw a big XRT call buyer I want to say about 3 weeks ago. They put this huge XRT position on, but it expired. I believe it expired at the end of November. So their timing was wrong, and that was someplace in here. And this thing has, they were right, but their timing was off. Up to $44 and back above, firmly now above the 200-day moving average. Haven't seen that since back here. Pretty impressive. And then the home builders, they just continue to. There was some more housing data. Look at this chart. I mean, there's a little bit of a Lennar call buyer. So what did I do today? If you go to my trades channel, you could see just a lot of trading today, and adding to some bad positions. Comcast was another one. I mean, these are really big, nice winners. This has been a trade that I just put on a couple days ago. Visa, I added to, I think, 2 or 3 times today. I actually put on a trade at NVIDIA. We just don't normally see that many pullbacks in NVIDIA, and it looked attractive to me. Buying that name on dips has been really good. We'll see if it works out or not. FedEx, I mentioned, was basically a home run. I did actually have a hedge on for the NDX. I bought that back. So I made some money on a hedge. I bought most of that back today. CME, I forgot to mention this one, but this was a trade that we put a video out back on Halloween, 10/31. I know a lot of people. Again, I've mentioned Twitter too many times on this call, but Twitter was CME was a name that a lot of people were talking about yesterday on Twitter. We put that trade on as the first day that it was announced that CME was going to be trading Bitcoin futures, which was back on 10/31. We put that trade on, and that's also I would classify as a home run at this point. 137 up to 147, booyah! And again, people talking about it now, um, or yesterday. Come on. A couple other trades. I did try. I put on a weekly position for Micron. I'm holding it overnight just for 37 cents. But huge winner in FTX. A couple other names that I think I forgot to mention. Took some profits in. DXJ was another winner for me as well. All right, so that's today's recap. Have a great night. And again, maybe look for a little bit more volatility. Get some sleep tonight and back at it tomorrow morning. Thanks. Have a great night.